I think we're going live now.
Great. Yes, wait. Yeah, we are live now.
Yeah. Jacob, yeah, but he's muted. Jacob, are you on the? Yeah.
Oh, you want me to unmute on the Twitter space? Got it. Perfect. Hello? Can you guys hear me all right? Let me get this set up.
We hear you well from all the devices. Thanks everyone for joining us. I saw Thomas joined early in, everyone. Thanks for having this conversation with us today. We're live on Twitter X, and we're live in different media, YouTube, LinkedIn, Zoom link, so join wherever you can. Today we have a special guest, Jacob Thompson from LEDGER. So thanks for joining us today, Jacob. It's great that you're here. So a lot of people coming to today are people already in the crypto world, the Web3, Web2. They already have a bit of knowledge about the subject, and we want to go deeper today into security. It's a big hot topic. It's a growing
topic, absolutely. A lot of people, a lot of conversations that haven't talked about it.
So we thought we would invite someone who's directly working on security. They can't hear you properly.
How about now? Does it sound good now?
Nope.
It's perfect now. Thank you.
Sweet.
So we will start having a talk. So for today, we will, maybe Jacob and I will start discussing a bit what his thoughts are, what maybe learning some, just reminding a few basic things, and then feel free to ask your questions. We are happy and ready to answer as best as we can. So feel free to drop in your questions if we're discussing. I'll leave them at the end or ask us as we go. What do you think about that?
Sounds good to me. Absolutely.
I will mute here. Okay. So what I wanted to, I will go back to the very basic for people. First, what I want to cover first is maybe when we talk about security, we're talking about encrypting and decrypting. What are these terms and what are they used for? So basically, encryption is when you put some information into a code. And decryption is when you put you put the code back into the information. We are also another important concept that people have to keep in mind that is going to probably be mentioned are differences between private key and public key. So a private key is used for encrypting and decrypting. It's information shared between the sender and the receiver of this encrypted data. On the other hand, a public key is used only for the purpose of encrypting data. So far, so good. We've seen applications of this, something that came out more in the outside world, WhatsApp. When you send a message to someone on WhatsApp, It's an encrypted message, and it's shared only between the sender and the receiver. So this is just kind of to bring everyone some basic information. I don't know if you want to add something, or we can move on.
No, it sounds great. I think private keys and public keys are super important, and knowing the difference between the two is really vital to understanding what you need to be worried about versus what you don't need to be worried about in regards to hot wallets and cold wallets and signatures and transactions. I think that it's a concept people probably have heard about a lot, speaking on private keys or public keys, but knowing exactly what they are and what they represent, I think is really important to having an overall better understanding of how the space works.
It's really true. If anybody has additional questions, we're happy to answer. So you mentioned the important concept, cold wallet and hot wallet. So for example, we can starting the basic definition of a hot wallet is a wallet that's always connected to the internet, versus a cold wallet it's not compromised because it's not necessarily connected to the internet. So some of the characteristics of a hot wallet is they allow you to store, send, and receive tokens. These hot wallets, if I'm correct, you can maybe correct me on this one. They have both private and public keys, and this helps to facilitate the transactions between users. I don't know if you want to complement.
Yeah, both. Yeah, that's correct. Hot wallets do have public and private keys. So cold wallets also have the same. The big difference between a cold wallet and a hot wallet is more of how the private keys were generated and stored. So a hot wallet like MetaMask or Phantom is going to generate the public or the private keys and the recovery phrase online on the internet and store them online and on the internet, which is why they're considered hot, because they're accessible or can be accessible by a malicious actor or just really anyone. I mean, we've seen recently with MetaMask, you have your recovery phrase backed up on your Apple account, which can be terrifying. And but no, it's also like, the odds of that happening or someone breaking into that is not super high, but still it's like you want to be 100% secure. And that's where like Ledger devices or hardware wallets or cold storage comes into play, because the device itself, the Ledger device, as most of you probably know of or seen the thumb drive, the point of the device is to generate the 24 words offline and store those 24 words on the device through the secure element, which is the chip that is designed to keep that information on the device and not allow it to leave the device under any circumstances. And that level of protection really is that first step to be totally secure when you get into crypto, because that protection of your recovery phrase means that no one is going to be able to access your accounts and be able to manage or transfer or do anything with those assets. And that's kind of where the difference between public and private keys come into play. Private keys are what you're using to sign transactions that allow you to manage assets or crypto. And the public keys are what you're using to call out to contracts, to addresses, to different dApps, websites. And it's also what allows you to that address is how you're able to view your assets online or other people's assets. Public key is almost like your self-identifying information to be able to know who you are. A lot of people, the address name, people go by address names, or ENS comes in to be able to play a part as that public key and that public address. So, but yeah, to kind of go back a little bit, I kind of went on a tangent. The hot wallets are at its core just how a recovery phrase is generated and stored, and cold wallets are how a recovery phrase is generated and stored. Cold wallets being the safer way of the two.
Great, it's amazing information. And it's I think it's so relevant nowadays when we get going a bit of crypto. When we open accounts, we always need to be generating different passwords, and we know how important keeping our passwords safe and in case our phone gets stolen, or and it's true that I think we need help from these devices and different ways to help us keep something as important as a crypto wallet in a secure manner. So going a bit towards Ledger, how does the hardware is compatible with different softwares for the storage, or how is that working?
Yeah, so for a lot of different, with the Ledger device, the way that it works is you're interacting with Ledger Live, which is our software program. On Ledger Live, we have integrations for tons of different chains and tokens, but there are some chains where we are unable to either we just don't have the capability right now, or it's not the ability to create accounts and wallets they're just not on Ledger Live, which then requires you to connect to different third-party wallets like MetaMask for ETH, or Phantom for Solana, or Yori for ADA and everything else. And something that's kind of gets brought up a lot whenever we talk about connecting your hardware device to a third-party wallet, for example, that process does not put you in any danger. All you're doing is giving the third-party wallet access to your public key, which then allows you to call on to transactions and through websites and such, which then requires you to sign the transaction with your ledger, which has your private key. So a lot of people, I think, tend to be afraid or stray away from connecting to third-party wallets, but we always try to advise to not be worried about doing so, because being able to connect to third-party wallets increases your ability to interact with the blockchain using the Ledger device to help you stay secure and safe. And I think it's really important to remember that the device is designed to protect you. And in doing a process such as connecting to a third-party wallet, while it might sound scary doing it, or for the first time hearing about it, ultimately, it's not going to put you in any harm's way to do so.
And that's great. It's true that one of the main values of Ledger is security. So they will make sure that all the steps are thought out to make sure that it's as secure as possible. I'm also curious to learn more about the literal material, the metal, and I'm sure you have maybe a lot of engineers in the team and the people who, because it has to be resistant to fire and different elements. Can you maybe expand a bit on that, please?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting question that segues into a great point. So the Ledger device is not actually as strong as you might think. Actually, we had recently seen a case where somebody's dog had chewed and destroyed their ledger, which was unfortunate, but it brings up a great opportunity to talk about what is really important when it comes to the device. And that is, like we've been talking about, is the recovery phrase. So what the device is designed to do is protect the recovery phrase when you're using it online, but when you're thinking about the recovery phrase in the physical world, because when you first set up the phrase, when you first set up your device, you are prompted to write down the 24 words. We provide a 24-word sheet in the box, which gives you a nice, easy way to write those words down in order. And that's going to be your only backup to your crypto, right? That's the only backup that exists anywhere to your assets in the event that you lose your ledger or your ledger breaks. And that's what's really important, and how to, and protecting that in a way that's fireproof or blast proof or waterproof is really important. And that's why we sell products such as the billfold, the crypto tag Zeus now recently, and the crypto steel, which is basically like a small steel capsule. And the idea is that you then put the recovery phrase in the steel capsule to allow it, to give it the ability to be fireproof and blast proof and waterproof. And I think that's what's really important is you taking the time to know how to protect the phrase rather than the device. Because if you were to say allow your dog to chew through the device, you might be originally thinking, my assets are gone, everything is, I'm in huge trouble. But as long as you have those 24 words, you can then buy another Ledger device and then restore the device with your 24 words, and you'll have complete access to your crypto as you did before. So we always tell people, like, it's the device is important, but keeping the 24 words safe is just as important as the device itself. In the event that you lose the device or break it, you're able to still access your assets and you haven't lost them.
Great. The dog of the story is a bit crazy.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. We always see different ways that people, leave it on the train, leave it, out on, out in the park. It burns in a fire. The dog chewing it, getting their dog to chew it up was the first time I'd seen that, and it's really unfortunate. But luckily he had his phrase, so he was able to get a new ledger and be totally fine. But it is kind of funny, but it brings up a great opportunity to talk about what exactly you need to be protecting and what you should put your focus on protecting. We have a lot of people that talk about leaving their ledgers in safes and never touching them, and I don't particularly agree with this sentiment, because your ledger, you can think of it as like a nice car, where you obviously want to keep it safe and protected and well kept, but you also have to drive it. You have to use it so it doesn't, you don't have your firmware updates super far behind, or the device doesn't charge. You want to be actively using it, because you shouldn't be concerned that you're going to lose that recovery phrase because you have it stored in a safe place.
Yeah, it's made to be used. I was wondering if people put them on even bank safes or at safes, and yeah, I was wondering that.
Oh yeah, people do that all the time. I always say, if you're gonna put it in like a safety deposit box, put the phrase, or I've seen people who will put half of their recovery phrase in a safety deposit box and keep the other half. That way, the bank doesn't have access. You're the only one with access to your recovery phrase. So it's really up to the person and what they feel like is most comfortable. But I always recommend that if you do have a ledger and like you've been keeping it in a safe for the last year, probably good to pull it out, dust it off, plug it in, make sure it's charged, update the firmware, and then you can put it back if you want to. But make sure that it's updated and still working, because you don't want to run into a situation where your device is too outdated to connect to Ledger Live, and then you realize you don't have your recovery phrase, and then it becomes this whole thing. So make sure that you're staying updated to things, and that you're able to dust off the device every once in a while.
Maybe going a bit on that, if so the phrase is, of course, stays the same, but the software is we have the updates. How is that affecting, if you save it and you don't use it for a few years, and the software is really changing? How are you guys? Is that changing something, or?
Yeah, so when essentially what can happen is if your device is outdated, like the firmware of the device is outdated by a couple of years. I think for right now, I believe the firmware update that's considered too outdated was only for the Nano S, and it was like the 26. It was like basically you you could have you had to not update it for like 4 years for it to not basically what it means is it's unable to connect to Ledger's nodes to be able to transmit transactions. Like it's not able to call transactions because it doesn't have the capability to be able to connect and to work with Ledger's nodes, which then results you in being unable to transfer assets from the device itself. Now, if this were to happen to you, if you have your recovery phrase, it's not a big deal. You just need to update the firmware of the device all the way through, and if it resets, the device resets during that process, then you're able to restore it with the recovery phrase. Or you can, if the device just doesn't work anymore, you can just buy a new device and restore it with the recovery phrase, and then you're good to go. My main point from this is, as long as you're keeping the phrase safe, you never have to worry about your device being too outdated, because you'll always be able to use the phrase with a new ledger or update the ledger all the way through and you're totally secure. It's just situations where, and I've seen people in this situation where they have devices that are super outdated and they don't have the recovery phrase anymore for it. Or they have devices like they have the original Ledger wallet, which is back in like 2010, 2011. And there's just no capabilities for it to connect to Ledger Live or to really anything. And a lot of people have assets on that they can't access because they don't have that recovery phrase anymore. But if they did, then they would just be able to use that recovery phrase to restore the assets. So the big point to take away from all this is keep the recovery phrase safe at all costs, and make sure that you have access to it, and make sure that it is legible and readable, and you can it's in the correct 24 when it's in the correct order when it was displayed to you, and you'll never have to worry about any of these situations that we're talking about here.
Great. Yeah, it's you mentioned also the year 2010 when the Ledger started, and it's amazing that since then, I'm sure you've seen in Ledger a lot of progress for this security.
Yeah, I can't speak on the devices back then because I was in 2010. I mean, I'd be like 13. So I unfortunately was not using a ledger at that time. I wish I was in crypto at that time, but not the case. But yeah, I've definitely been surprised seeing people utilizing the really, really old devices. It's definitely interesting. And it's always unfortunate whenever we run into those and we just can't figure out how to allow the device to work. Because it's a lot of the times it's people who have found it after a bunch of years and they're like, oh, I know I have crypto on this. How can I access it? And it's like, there's nothing that we can do. There's nothing that can really be done in the situation, which is unfortunate because you definitely wish that you would be able to help people unlock those assets and get them. But it's that's why the 24 words are so important, because it really makes sure that you have the security to lose a device and be able to restore your assets in any kind of event.
Great. For people who are considering maybe moving their assets from a hot wallet into Ledger, should they consider doing it all at once or maybe over time? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I typically recommend to do it all at once. Definitely do it in like a later evening when gas is really low. One of the things that you cannot do is when you first get your Ledger device, you obviously have the option to import a recovery phrase into the device. This is used for like we've been talking about, if you have a different Ledger recovery phrase and you have a new Ledger, to be able to restore that device to have your assets. But the functionality with the device allows you to import a 12-word recovery phrase. The 12-word recovery phrase being standard for MetaMask. And we have a lot of people that will take their 12-word recovery phrase from MetaMask and put it into their Ledger, thinking that their assets are now safe. And I would argue that I think that you can get really technical into it. I would say that all you've really done is create a hot wallet with extra steps, because your MetaMask account still has that recovery phrase. And even if you were to reset it, reset your MetaMask and delete that recovery phrase, it still was generated online. And if you buy a ledger, the idea is to have 100% security, to be 100% certain that your recovery phrase was generated offline and that's secure. So don't go importing your recovery phrase into your Ledger device, for anyone using MetaMask and getting a Ledger. Wait till gas is low, transfer your assets over to your Ledger. You don't have to abandon the hot wallet totally. I still use the hot wallet today, but if you're looking to secure those assets, move them all over at once. Make sure the gas is low so you're not paying too much in gas, and make sure that the recovery phrase you generated was generated on the device.
On the device, perfect. That's really helpful helpful tools. For people who maybe you already talked about this, but for people who have a hot wallet, what are some ways that the assets can get stolen? Can you have maybe a lot of knowledge about that?
So the main concern with using a hot wallet and getting your assets stolen is in that event that someone is able to, steal the recovery phrase from your device, whether that's, or steal the recovery phrase from the hot wallet, not the device. If your recovery phrase is stored on your computer, like on a Word doc or on an email or on a picture, or they're able to access your computer and just access your recovery phrase outright. Your recovery phrase on MetaMask is only hidden behind the password you set for MetaMask, so it's not particularly secure. And in the event that someone is able to get their recovery phrase, they then have access to all of your assets. And I think this is a good opportunity to talk about what are the two. I mean, there are really two main ways that you can get wrecked in this space. Number one being losing the recovery phrase, because that means that whoever has it now has access to all of your accounts across all of the chains and that you interacted with. And the second is signing a transaction that harms you. This is what we've seen more predominantly in the NFT space as of recently. It's what you read a lot about on Twitter, people losing their Bored Apes. That is usually the result of transactions. And I think that's really important to touch on, because a MetaMask is essentially has the same level of protection as a Ledger does when it comes to signing transactions that are bad. And what I mean by that is, if you sign a transaction where the result of the transaction is sending your NFTs to an address, a Ledger device isn't going to protect you from doing that, just like MetaMask won't protect you from doing that. The important piece to knowing when not to do that is having the knowledge of what transactions are bad versus what transactions are good, getting substantial or relevant information during the process of the transaction to make an educated understanding and guess on what it is what's happening, and be able to know what you're doing. And I think those two things are what you have to be able to be truly safe in this space. Because a lot of people think that, oh, I bought a Ledger, my assets are on a Ledger, I can't lose them ever. And the reality is, if you're interacting with scam contracts, or if you get presented with a transaction that is intended to harm you, and you don't stop and read through it and understand what the transaction is doing, then you can harm yourself even with a Ledger device.
Got it. It's a lot of the education when people jumped into the crypto world. They didn't necessarily they jumped on it, let's say, and they hear something, Elon Musk make a tweet about something, and they jumped. And it's always emphasized to really, as you say, the Ledger part is already covering a very important part, but there's the part about the specific transactions.
Absolutely.
I saw that Thomas maybe raised his hand, had a question. You want to jump in?
Yes, but maybe you have other questions.
We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi,
Hello.
thanks for your time. So I was wondering, so I have several questions, but you said to move the assets to the ledger. So do you mean that when my MetaMask account is compromised, it's my whole wallet on MetaMask is compromised, or it's just the account? Because for instance, I have an account which is like an account without cold wallet, and I have an account with cold wallet. So if one of my accounts on the wallet gets compromised, does the whole MetaMask get compromised?
Yeah, I think I understand the situation. When you connect your Ledger device to MetaMask, assuming that's the cold wallet you have connected to MetaMask, if your MetaMask was compromised, that Ledger account will not be compromised. If you have, like, let's say you have 2 to 3 accounts on MetaMask, if you were to sign a transaction that harms you, okay, perfect. If you were to sign, let's say you had 3 accounts on MetaMask, and you were to lose your MetaMask recovery phrase was to get stolen, then all 3 of those MetaMask accounts would be compromised. But if you were to sign a transaction that like, let's say on one of your accounts, let's say one account you have 10 Bored Apes, on your second MetaMask account you have 100 ETH, and on your third MetaMask account you have 10 Doodles. If you were to interact with a contract that harms you with the address that holds your Bored Apes, then only that address gets harmed, right? And they can only interact with that address. The ETH and the other accounts won't be touched. Sorry, and the NFTs in the other accounts won't be touched. So it depends on what exactly it is you're getting, like how your accounts get compromised. And so, like, if you were to lose a recovery phrase, all the MetaMask accounts are compromised. If you're signing a bad transaction, only that address gets compromised. But for either of those, if it's just your MetaMask that gets compromised, your Ledger accounts cannot be affected.
Thank you. I had a second question because we talked about crypto and assets. Can you talk to us about NFT storage? Because, for instance, I've got a Nano S, and I was thinking about getting a Nano X. What's the difference for storing NFTs? And yeah, what for storing NFTs in particular? Why is the Nano X better than the Nano S, or the different features?
Yeah. I can repeat the question as well. So the question was, what's the difference between storing your NFTs on like a Nano S compared to like the S Plus and the X? That's a pretty easy question. The Nano S, so the main difference in terms of storing NFTs is all 3 Ledger devices will be able to store NFTs the same. The big difference is the Nano S does not have the ability to transfer NFTs from Ledger Live directly. So in that situation, you would have to connect your Nano S to MetaMask to then connect them OpenSea and transfer the NFTs there, which you can do the same with the S Plus and the X. It's just that the S Plus and the X have the ability to transfer NFTs directly from Ledger Live, which just makes it more secure. Obviously, you're using Ledger Live rather than, OpenSea, and you're staying within that same area. But alongside of that, the Nano S also has less storage than the other two devices, which does not affect the amount of NFTs you can hold. But what it does affect is the amount of apps that you can use on the device. So if you're somebody that has Solana NFTs, Polygon NFTs, ETH NFTs, and Cardano NFTs, you're not going to be able to have all 4 of those apps on the device at the same time. And so you'll have to uninstall like 2 of them or 1 of them to be able to use the other 3. And then you'll have to uninstall 1 of those 3 and to be able to use the other one and to re-download it and go back and forth. So typically, if you're an NFT user, go for the S Plus or the X. The S Plus has been sunsetted, and so we don't. It's not a device I would recommend buying anymore. If you're still using it, it's fine, but definitely think about upgrading it within the next 2 years or so.
Great. Do you have more questions, Thomas, or anyone else?
Yeah, I had one last question. So it was more about also 1,000 Faces. So we've seen that the Solana market volume has been getting over Ethereum market volume for NFTs. What do you think about the difference between building on the ETH blockchain and this Solana blockchain?
Yeah, I think this is more of a personal preference. I kind of came into the space on ETH NFTs, and I have a soft spot for ETH NFTs. I think there's a lot of really cool Solana NFTs coming out, and I think they're growing in terms of that culture. I don't think that I have a preference on which one you should want to build on. I think it really just depends on your capabilities and what you feel like the chain will bring to your project. If you feel like the Solana community will better your community, then go for that. If you feel like the ETH NFTs will better your community, go for that. It's just I think it's more of a personal preference and up to you completely.
Okay, I was asking that question because there are risks regarding the volatility of the price, and so Solana is basically cheaper than ETH, and the transaction fees are also cheaper. So maybe that's an incentive that provided NFT builders to build on that specific chain. But that's why I was asking the question.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a great question.
Okay. Thanks for the questions. It's okay for the sound. Okay. Anybody else? Saying echo. Which one do I mute? There's echo. I hope it's okay now. Got it. Got it. Got it.
Yeah, it becomes complicated.
Anybody else have a question? Otherwise, I can pick Jacob's brain a bit more.
I just had one last question, if I may.
What are in the future, maybe, what are some predictions, or maybe Nusha wants to ask something?
Yeah, Thomas, he said he has one last question. If he can ask it before. before your question.
Sorry, can you?
No, Thomas, he had his last question. So you want, yeah.
Perfect. We can let Thomas speak.
Thank you. Jacob, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Recently, I've heard about vaults, which is a new kind of maybe cold storage. What's the difference between Ledger cold wallet and those vaults I've been hearing about, which are supposed to be more secure, but can you explain the difference in the technology, or maybe yeah?
Yeah, I can't speak on it too much just because I'm not super involved in that. Ledger Vault is just is like an enterprise solution for companies and DAOs and projects looking for a more secure way to secure their funds, their crypto. It's mostly reserved for bigger brands, per my understanding. I've kind of haven't really seen a whole lot about it, so I don't actually know a whole lot to be able to answer your question. But it's more of just like an enterprise solution for storing your crypto in a probably a more I guess I want to say more of like a centralized way within the company. I believe like the recovery phrase is split between multiple devices. It's kind of like a really fancy multi-sig, per my understanding. But it's not like a solution that's available to like the public, basically.
And the Ledger marketplace, do you think it will be a good solution for listing a project safely?
Yeah, Ledger at the moment, Ledger Market's not really designed, or the plan for it, per my understanding, isn't necessarily for it to become like another OpenSea. The idea is it's for it to be really a market curator, and for artists to be able to bring out more projects, art, and allow for a safe and secure minting process for users using Ledger Market and clear signing. And so it's really more of a drop site to be able to get access to sweet collabs for the time being.
You're mute, Marvin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, good.
The security landscape that exists of blockchain, and what are the areas that you think that Ledger can position? Your position itself in the future.
Yeah.
So my question was that the security landscape in the blockchain, what are the areas that you're lacking at the moment, and what are, for example, the area that Ledger is planning to position itself, and how do you see that, like sort of as a vision of the company?
Yeah, I think, I personally can speak on this really well. I think, to me, one of the things that Ledger is doing better at, and one of the things that I'm really passionate about within this company, is the education side of security. Doing a lot of these AMAs with different projects and communities has given me the opportunity to kind of share the wealth of knowledge and help give more access to communities in terms of conversations and communities and things that are necessary to be able to learn about different parts of Web3 and security, and the best practices for protecting yourself. I think these conversations are the most important for the space. And my personal goal is to continue to grow these conversations and to be able to grow that overall knowledge of security, like, because I think that it's the most important thing going forward, especially in regards to how NFT users are experiencing the space with a lot of these transactions and contracts and these malicious actors that are trying to get them with phishing attempts. Being able to know the best way to secure yourself is the most important thing that you can do in the space, and that's what I'm hoping that myself and Ledger can do here in the future.
Was the question about education in security for Ledger? Well, can you just briefly tell us what the question was, Mujan, please?
Sure, I was just for the statement where Ledger positions itself and for them, I see that the mindset we can sort of and they actually think that they're going to be working on it. So yeah, let's do that.
So Mujan asked about the projection of any comments from the YouTube channel or someone else? So just maybe a few more minutes. When we talked about Ledger as secure, and we talked about transactions that can be hijacked, etc. So for people who are maybe considering jumping into a project, buying NFTs, what would you recommend? Do you have recommendations of maybe how to differentiate a scam from the real thing, we'll call it?
Sorry about that. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of great resources out there right now. I think that it's a growing conversation, especially on Twitter. I would definitely recommend, if you're new to the space and you're trying to get more involved, find yourself on Twitter. There's a lot of great resources, and OX Quit on Twitter. He's a great mega thread pinned to the top of his Twitter, talking about different transactions and things you need to watch out for. Ledger Academy also is a great resource, as well as our YouTube. We have a ton of great information and blogs and articles written about different scams. We actually have a scam article coming out this week that talks about the different types of transactions that can be used maliciously and when to watch out for them. So I'm not sure if it's out yet, but when it does come out, that would be the first thing that I would recommend, is reading through that, because it is a wonderful article, and it talks about all the things that you need to watch out for, and should hopefully prepare you before you get involved in it. And then once you're kind of in the space, I think it really having a strong community around you also helps to be able to verify things and to help feel more comfortable. Asking questions is really, really nice. Being able to talk to people like, hey, I'm a little worried about this. Does this look suspicious? There's nothing wrong in that. But at the end of the day, I think being able to just recognize the function names and what they do is going to be the one of the big key components in being able to avoid running into them when you shouldn't be.
This is you can go for it, Mujan. You will say the question and I will repeat it so that people on Zoom can hear too. So go for it.
Yeah, so we've been discussing a lot recently since you're meeting around NFTs about what are the safety mechanisms for NFTs to be implemented to put them in the smart contracts. For example, there are some to avoid, I think that renter is signing or like your NFTs being seen. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it, but basically people can, like hackers can know if your like the rivers NFTs are coming up, so they can actually buy that NFTs in the market, and if they are not completely random when they are revealed, that can happen. I wanted to know that what are the things that you think that maybe you can share with us, or you know about it, Jacob, about the security in the smart contract, tips and tricks that when you want to buy something, how can we check that, or where we want to make our own production, but that's where do you have any comments on that?
I'm really not able to speak on that in technically, like in the technical terms, just because of my knowledge. But I would say in regards to like sniping, for example, where you have people who are able to buy NFTs before they're revealed, knowing that they're going to be rare, that just kind of falls down to the preparation the project takes in regards to before the mint. One of the things that can happen is if you were to test the mint on a test network or test a contract on a test network, you're able to figure out essentially what tokens are tied to what traits, and then are able to buy those. I don't necessarily think that this is like a malicious act, and from a security standpoint, I think it's just an oversight on projects, making sure that when mints happen, they're completely random. And it doesn't necessarily affect the user. But I would say one of the things that can help you can do to help avoid situations or being run into situations that can harm you is a Chrome extension that I'm a fan of is actually revoke caches, which it'll pop up anytime that you're being asked to do a set approval for all, which is a popular scam. It's actually a very useful transaction function that is completely necessary in the space, but a lot of people use it maliciously. And that it'll pop up and let you know what it's asking for, what the approval's for, and it can kind of give you like a warning on whether or not you should be seeing it or when you should. Like you should only be seeing set approvals for all in like OpenSea or on LooksRare or on like marketplaces. You shouldn't be seeing them on like a mint website. And so that extension can be helpful to where if you're trying to mint something and that pops up, that should be a huge red flag for you. Revoke.cache. It's Revoke Cache is it's a wonderful website as well for clearing unwanted approvals. And they recently made a Chrome extension that essentially helps protect against running into that transaction function where you're not supposed to.
Great. I have one last question coming from LinkedIn. And then we will start wrapping things up to be respectful of everyone's time. So the question says, if you need to give some advice about metaverse security part of the companies, what are your thoughts about metaverse security?
That's a great question. I don't know exactly what I would say in terms of metaverse security. I guess it kind of depends on the scope or where you are or how you're utilizing metaverse to protect yourself. I think obviously owning a ledger for the assets that you're using with the metaverse, Ledger is going to help protect those assets. And I think maybe this would be a good one. Is kind of just like a quote, not really a quote, it's more of a saying, just in regards to like, if something is too good to be true, it probably is. I think that's a really good thing to remember whenever you're interacting with Web3, or if you're in the metaverse. If someone's offering you something that is too good to be true, it usually is. So just make sure that whenever you're being presented with something along those lines, someone's trying to trade you something or trying to convince you to buy into something, always take a second to think about it, and obviously do your own research and don't jump into anything before taking the proper time to consider what it is you're actually doing.
Thank you for that. How can I think we will? It's 6. Unless there's an urgent question that pops up, maybe we will start wrapping up. How can people reach you or get to know more? How can we also have access to the article that you talk about? Would you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go on to Google and search for Ledger Academy, that's where you'll find the article, and as well as all the other articles we have on multitudes of Web3 topics and crypto topics. I always recommend people can @ me on Twitter, which should be able to see me in the space, or Ledger's recently opened up our Discord, which is another great resource if you are looking to just get some more information or you have a question on literally anything. We have a lot of us customer support agents are there to answer questions and to be help, and it's a great community that is dedicated to security. So Ledger Academy, shoot me a tweet on Twitter, and Discord would be my #1 recommendation for people that wanted to learn more.
Perfect. Sounds amazing. We will look for you at Discord too. We are creating our community in Discord, and we're very interested in getting people the community, and also a lot of education, having conversations like the one we had today. I think it's so important. We'll be in touch. We have just an announcement for everyone. We officially launched our education program next week, on next Thursday at the same time as today, 5 p.m. CET. We start with our first 1-hour workshop. We have normally 2 amazing guest speakers, and we are communicating about this. So join our Discord, and we will be happy to interact with us. Find us on Discord, find us on Instagram, on Twitter, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation. If there's not something else, I would like to thank Jacob for his time, his knowledge, his expertise. Thank you for everything.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks again for having me. It was an honor, and awesome to be able to chat with you.
It was.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Keep on connecting. Have a good evening or day wherever you are in the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Thomas.